Hi everyone, I'm Laura Warnod, and this is the WonderWorkers podcast. WonderWorkers is an interview-based podcast where I invite changemakers to talk about their experience, their mission, and drive towards impacting the world, and ultimately to inspire, educate, and empower entrepreneurs, business leaders, and owners, and young people on how they can build together a more sustainable world. This community of WonderWorkers act behind the scenes to lead the world towards a new era of purpose, self-actualization, and innovation. This is a generation who shows no limits to what they can accomplish, no tolerance for dehumanization, and use their uniqueness as a real power to change the world. We want to invite you, responsible leaders, entrepreneurs, young people, and all other listeners in your quest for purpose to give you too the power to change the world. But having powers alone does not make us superheroes. Even them need allies. It's only when we accept our differences, combine our powers, belong and thrive together that our forces can turn into superpowers. We are WonderWorkers, a community of changemakers, entrepreneurs, business owners, and aspiring ones who use their superpowers collectively to change the world. So tell me, what are your superpowers? Stacia Bedford was featured in Forbes, Metro, Evening Standard, and Elite Business magazine. She is an accomplished, dynamic, and disruptive repeat entrepreneur who pioneered the bridal tech space with the innovative e-commerce platform she co-founded, Prim & Clover, a first-of-its-kind online customizable bridal brand, wedding dress design tool, and marketplace. With an international industry-broad network and more than 15 years of marketing, fashion design, retail, and management experience, Stacia specializes in entrepreneurship coaching, leadership, team building, fashion, and marketing. For the last 5 years, she's coached founders through launching and scaling their startups and MMEs in the fashion, tech, and creative industries at the prestigious London College of Fashion, where she leads the Master of Fashion Entrepreneurship and Innovation course. I'm so glad to have someone who works in fashion education because I really believe that's where the future is and where change is going to happen. We've had such an inspiring and insightful conversation about entrepreneurship, about the fashion industry, leadership, and a lot of different things of the life of being a founder, basically. Just another note from me. If you want to follow our WonderWorkers journey and community, just jump on LinkedIn and Instagram under WonderWorkers podcast account, where you'll find all past episodes. If you really enjoy the episodes, I would really love to hear more from you and get your feedback and let me know if there's anything else or anyone else you would like to hear from next in the WonderWorkers podcast. So yeah, enjoy this episode and let's jump in. Hi, Stacia.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, good. I'm really happy that the weather and summer is finally here.
I'm getting used to British summers after a decade without air conditioning, or
of course,
the Brits say aircon.
You know what? It's really funny because I don't know if you heard about Ted Lasso, the TV show.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I finished the whole series yesterday, which is, by the way, amazing. And he said something like, I finally, he's American, obviously, and he lives in the UK during the season. And he said, I finally understood that AC is a right and not something that I take for granted.
It's true. I FaceTimed with my father the other day, and he was in a fleece because the air conditioning was so cold in their house that he was wearing a fleece jacket. And I was like, you're kidding me right now. I am dripping with sweat.
But well, we get used to it. Where are you from, actually?
I'm originally from the Chicago area.
Chicago, yes.
Very extreme temperatures, really hot in the summer and really, really cold, bitter cold in the winter. Lots of snow.
Yeah, can imagine. Nice. Well, before we start talking about what you do at the London College of Fashion and your experience in the fashion industry, which I'm really excited to be talking about because it seems like you have a lot of experience and wisdom to share on that. The question is who is Stacia? what's your story?
Wow. Where do I start? No, I would say I'm probably a jack of all trades. I don't want to say master of none because there's still time left for me to master something. Yeah, I just bounced around a lot. I've lived a lot of places. I've had a lot of careers. I think this is probably my 5th career change. I grew up wanting to be a famous actress, and I pursued that into my mid-20s. So I lived in Los Angeles, and I actually hosted a television show, which I think here is called, when you're like a TV presenter. So that was not what I had aspired to do, but that's where I ended up, which, I was really, really fortunate because there are lots of actors who spend a lot of time auditioning for lots and lots of things and don't really get to do much of anything. So that was lots of fun. Traveled around on an RV for months out of the year, basically following and chasing adrenaline sports junkies, doing like adrenaline sports and competitions and stuff. So we would like follow them. We would follow the competition. I would interview them. And then they always had me trying the sport, which usually ended in disaster, but they would like quote unquote fix it in post. So they would make it look like I could do whatever sport it was, like sandboarding, kiteboarding, kayak surfing. I don't know. There was so many weird things. Amazing. And then I moved to New York City and I ended up working in the music industry. So I worked for Universal Music for about 5 years for their jazz label, the Verve Music Group, and worked with some really amazing musicians, and actually Jamie Cullum, who's from here. So he was like a platinum selling artist here, and he came to the US, and we were trying to promote him in the US. So yeah, like I said, lots of different things. But I think leading up to London College of Fashion, 2 things happened. Well, I had dropped out of university to follow my dream of becoming an actress, much to my parents' chagrin, because they really, really wanted me to finish college, which, of course, that's what a parent wants. In the U.S., probably more so than here, it limits you in terms of what you can do for a job. And I was really, really fortunate that Universal Music Group didn't care that I didn't have my college diploma. But when a recession hit and I had left that job and gone on to work in digital music, and it was the .bomb, so there was all of these startup tech music companies that I was working for, slowly shut until there weren't any left. And then I was like, I gotta go start looking for something else. And all the doors were kind of being shut in my face. And at the same time, I had kind of started my own businesses on the side. So I was really, really into vintage clothing. I still am. But my parents at the time lived in Ohio. So I moved from Chicago all over the place. My parents ended up in Ohio, and they were great charity shops and thrift stores there. So I would go there and spend like, I don't know, $1 or $2 finding all these great like sort of designer pieces that were vintage. And because it was so expensive in New York City, my friends loved coming to my apartment and like basically, shopping my closet. So I would turn my studio apartment into like a little store once a month, and I called it Stacia Studio, and I would serve cheap kava or whatever I could find, Prosecco or whatever, and have like bagels, and basically it would turn into like an all day into the evening party, dress up party where people would shop. And it started out as friends, and it became friends of friends, and then friends of friends of friends. And they were like, people would look forward to Stacia Studio. Where are you going to do it next? And I probably, if I had really thought of it as a business and I had the right sort of, I don't want to say backing, but like knowledge, I probably could have turned that into quite a nice little business. And at the time, Etsy was just kind of burgeoning. So I started selling stuff on Etsy as well. So that was kind of my first foray into my own fashion business. And then I started messing around making jewelry with broken bits and bobs from like boxes of costume jewelry that I would get. And again, it was sort of like friends of mine would see necklaces and stuff that I was wearing. They're like, where did you get that? I want one of those. So I started making them for friends for birthdays, and then just kind of expanded from there. And I was in a boutique, a really nice Gigi boutique in the meatpacking district. And the woman who owned the shop walked up to me and said, where did you get that necklace? It's really cool. And I was like, actually, I made it. So she was like, do you have more of those? And I was like, well, not this one particularly, because it's, one of a kind or whatever. So that is how that started. So I started Revival Jewelry is what I was calling it. And there are other companies now called Revival. So if I ever went back to doing it again, I'd have to come up with a new name. But yeah, so I started selling my jewelry all over New York City. I did a trunk show at Henry Bendel. Around that time, my parents convinced me to go back to university. I was like 30 something. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I got to go back to university as a 30-year-old. And actually, it would have made, I think, a really funny movie. There have been some similar films made about where you're like, this old lady going back to school or whatever. But it was really fun. And I started taking classes on marketing, advertising, and actually entrepreneurship. So I was really kind of dabbling in that space. I'm still kind of doing my jewelry on the side and doing pop-ups and things. And right around the time I graduated, I met my now husband, who's British. I was over here in London. And he's the one who really kind of pushed me to make it like a fully fledged business. I think he did it quite selfishly because he wanted me to
stay.
Like move here.
Yeah, of course.
And he was like, "Oh, maybe you should look for a course here. You just fit. Why don't you go on to get your master's kind of thing?" So I found a master's in fashion entrepreneurship at London College of Fashion, and thankfully I got in. And so I pursued launching my jewelry brand here and met my now former business partner on the course. And at the time, I was kind of looking at having my jewelry be customizable. So when I would sell at pop-ups, I'd have a lot of customers come to me and say, "Oh my gosh, I love that design, but do you have it something like this in that color, or do you have this kind of brooch or whatever?" So that's when I thought, okay, well, I'll set up the design on a website, and then people can sort of drag and drop things out of a quote-unquote jewelry box that would be, the different buttons and brooches and whatever. So it would be that design, but they could kind of
make it themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. So they could play with it. So that's what I was looking to launch after the course, kind of this idea of customizable jewelry and accessories. Yeah. And my former business partner, she was on the course and she wanted to do mass customizable ready-to-wear. And so we were in the same friend group, and because our projects were similar, we shared a lot of secondary research and stuff like that. And then after we graduated, she said, "Why don't we start a brand together? I'll do the clothes, I'll do the ready-to-wear, and you do the sort of like jewelry and accessories." And I said, "Okay, that could be interesting." And so we kind of set out to do more primary research because neither one of us had really done a lot of primary research into that. And I realized that scale was going to be a really big problem for me because I only had what I had. And so to go out and shop and buy more stuff, and it's like there's like this fine balance or fine line of how much inventory you keep. And then if you're really lucky, you get like 1,000 sales in a month. Yeah. Then what do you do? Because everything you've got is gone. And, how do you fulfill that order? And same with the customizable ready-to-wear. There's so much available on the high street for women to buy. And we found out they just didn't want to wait like 6 to 8 weeks to get a piece of clothing, that they could, just so they could customize the buttons or something. So then my husband, he wasn't my husband then, but he proposed, and I started looking for a wedding dress. And of course, at that time, Pinterest was, the thing.
Place.
So
so
of course I started my Pinterest.
It still is though.
I suppose, but now there's like Lemonade. Instagram is much bigger now, and so I kind of would see different things, be like, oh, I like the top of that, but I want the bottom of that, and it kind of dawned on me as I was looking, there really wasn't anyone doing true customizable bridal wear where you could basically design your own dress from a set of like sort of standard silhouettes or, things. So I said to my former business partner, hey, why don't we, consider doing this? I can't be the only bride who's, wants this. Yeah. So, so we, again, set out and did the research and found out, there were lots of brides, especially busy brides, especially London brides, who were kind of like...
They don't have time to like go and have a look at all the bridal stores to find the perfect dress.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like they knew what they wanted, but it was sort of like yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And let's face it, the bridal space is kind of antiquated. I mean, it's not. It's been kind of as it's been for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And now weddings are changing. People are doing more days of it, and having almost like little mini festivals and things like that. So it was kind of the right time. This is all pre-COVID, of course. And yeah, so we ended up launching Prim and Clover, which was the first of its kind customizable bridal wear brand, where we had this dress builder that you could build your wedding dress based on, sort of number of necklines and skirts and silhouettes and stuff. And then, yeah, brides could try the pieces on at home, choose what they wanted, and then we'd make it and deliver it to their door. So that's where kind of there was a bit of a not the right time in the market situation, because women still, even though they didn't have time, wanted that experience of shopping for a wedding dress. Like they wanted to go with their friends and their
have
moms.
that glass of champagne while they're choosing the dress.
Exactly. We kind of remedied that by saying, oh, you can throw a party at home. We can even do a kit for you and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, it wasn't quite resonating. Of course, now I think it would, because after COVID, people are fine with being at home. But sadly, we didn't make it to COVID. I mean, we were doing fairly well, but my relationship with my business partner was kind of deteriorating. Okay. So, when you get started, you got all the hope and all the dreams and all the, all of that behind you. And we had so much support because we were disrupting the bridal wear space. We became bridal tech. Everything was like fash tech, bridal tech, this tech, that, fintech and wellness tech. I mean,
fash
everything.
Tech.
Everything added a tech at the end of it, and suddenly it was like cool. Yeah. So we run all these accelerators, and we were, got tons of press, and all of that was kind of great. And we were selling, but it just kind of wasn't. We just weren't getting over the hump, and it wasn't quite working the way that I felt like it should have worked. Most brides would just send us a photo and say, can you do this? And it's like, well, yeah, because if you go on the dress builder, it's this neckline and this skirt.
Right.
But yeah, it was like there was some kind of disconnect there. I kind of started to go in a different direction, recognizing the millennial bride and these festival weddings and wanting lots of different outfits and things that didn't look so wedding-y.
Right.
And the idea that you could, if you bought things in separates, wear the pieces again with like everyday clothing, as opposed to having it sit in a box somewhere or trying to resell it or whatever. Of course, rental platforms weren't, besides Rent the Runway or whatever, they weren't really that big at the time. So that's the route I had wanted to take. So I designed a collection called Maverick, and it was for the, sort of maverick bride who wanted to do something a bit different. And we also had a slip dress, like a sort of jumpsuit, and a wrap dress that could be done in other colors. So if that's what you wanted your bridesmaids to wear. Right. Or you could wear, I mean, it was like sort of, there was a lot of versatility in the idea. And it was mix and match bridal wear. So all of the pieces were designed to go with each other. And I had worked with our web developer to do this sort of like carousel. So you could like move the tops over the bottoms. We found this amazing model who stood in exactly like the same place. And we just like changed, and she was able to like put her arms and everything in the exact same place every single time so that we could get all of the shots. We did her in like sort of hero silhouettes, and then because she was so good at sort of like standing still in exactly the same spot, our web developer could do this carousel and make it match up. And that's where I saw the business going. And my business partner was like, no, we're customizable. That was the point. And I was like, yeah, but we can't hang. The idea is not working. So you gotta like
expand.
Yeah, you gotta change things up. Yeah. And I felt like this other idea was a bit more sustainable because you could wear the pieces again. The tops would look really cute with jeans and heels. The skirts you could wear with like a t-shirt. Go to a nice brunch. And we got a great response to it in terms of customer response. But I think because we'd already been having issues, it just was like kind of an easy thing to sort of divide on. Yeah. So we ended up shutting the business down. And I was kind of contemplating starting something else. And I went back to London College of Fashion because I had kept in touch with the course leader from the course. And I said, I'm not really sure what my next step is. I'm thinking about starting something again, but it's such a mountain to climb, and you're like pushing a boulder up a mountain. I think I might need a minute. And she said, why don't you come back to the class? Like I've changed it completely now. The course is really different, and I really think that the students could learn from your experience. And I was like, all right, sure, why not? So I went and spoke to the court, and I was like, oh, that was pretty interesting. So then she starts kind of filling me in on more and more on all these changes and how they're coaching the students now, and they weren't even calling them students, they were calling them team entrepreneurs, and it's like this kind of new way of teaching. And I thought, oh, this sounds kind of interesting. So she said, why don't you just try the coaching? Like, here are some books on it. I think you'd be really good at it. So I sat down and did some coaching sessions with some of the team entrepreneurs. And there was just that moment where you could see the light bulb go off, or I should say on, really, for that student. And that was it. I was kind of sold. It was like, whoa. It was like this, it was a feeling I'd never really had before, where you kind of like, oh, wow, I might be making a difference here. And then, of course, playing back in my mind all the people along my path and my journey who switched that light bulb on for me. And I thought, oh, okay, well, maybe I could hang out here for a while and do this. So, yeah, I mean, that's really kind of the journey. That was a really, really long story.
No, but that's amazing. And yeah, I feel there's so many things that I want to talk about here. So I guess the first one, going back to like your first experiences. So if I remember well, so you wanted to be an actress, and then you went into journalism, or like TV presenter if you prefer, and then you went to the music industry, and then you went back to college, did your course in entrepreneurship and started your business. And then that's how you evolved to get to London College of Fashion. What has helped you, like each time you had that change in step? Like, what did you tell yourself each time you changed, you changed job? Because I feel like sometimes, I mean, today, obviously, it's way easier to kind of try something out and then do something else. And then, but then sometimes, you have that hope of like being like, okay, now I'm going to do this thing. That's the thing for me. Or like, I'm really interested in that and I want it to work. And then obviously, if it doesn't work, then you're like, shit, now what do I do, right?
Yeah.
And then you need to start over again and again. So what was your experience with that? Like, how did you react or learn from, changing careers a lot, as you said?
Yeah. It's interesting. Firstly, I think all of those experiences kind of led me to where I am. And you sort of need all of that. It's all of those things that kind of prepare you. I used all of those things in entrepreneurship. But I think, well, two things. Maybe it goes back to my name actually means rebirth, apparently. So I don't know if there's something about me that's sort of like Phoenix wanting to rise from the ashes. So it's like, try this. Also, there were a couple of kind of mantras that I had for a long time. No fear was one of them. Like just, just kind of, you can live your life in fear and regret, or you can just try something, just do it. And if like, what's the worst that could happen, really? I mean, because if you fail, there's always a tomorrow. So there's kind of no excuse to not just try. Unless, of course, somebody else's life is at risk or something like that. You know, I mean, there's a really interesting scene. There's a series on Elizabeth Holmes, who's an entrepreneur, right? She's that kind of, infamous for trying to do the healthcare thing and telling people that from a prick a finger and like a drop of blood that you could find out whether or not they had all these diseases, et cetera, et cetera. So she goes to her college professor at Stanford and is telling her about this idea. And, she quotes Yoda and says, there is no do or do not or whatever. There is no try. And the woman just like freaks out on her. And she's like, what are you talking about? Like, why are you quoting like, you try and you try and you try, like you do need to do the research. Like there needs to, but I think maybe I was a bit ADHD. And so I didn't put a lot of thought into things. So that sort of no fear thing would just kind of click over in my head and I'd just go and do something without overthinking it, without worrying about what
Could happen.
what the consequences would be, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
But also, I think I can't remember who said it to me at some point in my life too, about the 2-second rule. Like, if you wait, you could get stuck. So it was sort of like, if I waited too long doing something that I knew wasn't right for me, then I was afraid of getting stuck. So it was just like, okay, I just kind of have to jump to the next thing. And I mean, I'm not going to lie, I feel very, very, very fortunate that things, I don't want to say fell into my lap, but that I would be able to recognize an opportunity that would appear, and that I, had enough confidence or enough courage to just try and grab hold of it. Now, there are lots of opportunities that did come about and I didn't take advantage, but I mean, I'm not upset about where I am. So I have to, there's a part of me that kind of believes that kind of what's meant to be will happen.
You just said like that, some opportunities came and you didn't necessarily take them. What made you take those decisions?
Well, at the time, I remember a lot of that happened in my acting career. So you get a lot of offers for things come up. And when you're an actress, it's a tough spot, especially back then. I mean, this was back in the days when, all the Harvey Weinstein stuff. Anyone who says they didn't know that he was doing that is a liar, because I was there. And even I knew as a lowly nobody that if you got a meeting with Harvey Weinstein, that's what you could expect would happen. I mean, casting couch was very, very normal. So you really had to wear your armor and be like, I'm not really sure if this is going to be the best choice for my career, because at that time, any little thing that you did could kind of ruin your chances for being picked for something that you really wanted. So it's less like that now. I feel like actors can they can do whatever they want. They could do TV series, they can do film, they can do adverts, commercials, and nothing is like a bad choice. But back then it was like, I knew taking the TV presenter role to pick something that was kind of obscure and wouldn't be on a major network or anything, so that I could use it as experience and a stepping stone, but that it wouldn't be too big, that it would keep me from getting other opportunities that I want, because really wanted to be a film actress. So through doing that, though, I got offers to do like Ocean Pacific, OP, it was like bathing suits and stuff like that, wanted me to be one of their brand ambassadors, and I turned it down. Probably, I mean, would have been amazing money, and it would have, probably could have catapulted, but it was then very bikini model-ish. I also got an offer to be on MTV and present for like some MTV thing, and I turned it down because there again it was like, I don't want to be pigeonholed as a TV presenter. Which now looking back, I'm like, you dummy. What's wrong with that? Like, it would have been a great career. But I had my sights set. I wanted to be Meryl Streep. So Meryl Streep wouldn't be romping around a beach in her bikini.
No, that makes sense. And what happens when you actually realize, okay, I'm not made for this, or like, this is not for me? Because I guess, everyone has big dreams, right? Everyone has, and I feel like the dream of being an actress is like, especially a big one, and something that, is really glamorized, and like there's a lot of people who dream about being actors or actresses, but that works in everything in life. Like, whatever you are passionate about, if you have a dream, you're like, you want to make it happen, right? So I guess what happens when you actually realize that maybe this is not the right thing?
Every career, except for the music industry, for whatever reason, leaving that was not as, I don't want to say devastating. It was like a death, leaving it, because it was such a big part of who I was. I mean, I literally could not remember a time in my life growing up when that's not what I wanted. I mean, everything that I did, I was in singing lessons, dancing lessons, doing every theater musical everything kids theater, everything that I could possibly do, I did. So in pursuit of that. So leaving it behind was a really, really painful decision at the time. I remember it was like an ex-boyfriend of mine had given me, he was in LA and I had moved to New York, I was considering moving to New York at that point. Like I had just gone for the summer because there was an actor's strike and a writer's strike pending in LA. But actor friends of mine in New York were like, oh, no, you should come to New York. There's still stuff going on here. So I was just going to go for the summer. And then then the job for Universal kind of like came up and everybody was like, oh, you should go for that job. Like it sounds really cool. And I thought, I don't really want to be sitting at a desk. But I thought, but I suppose if I would take that kind of job, that would be the coolest kind of desk job you could have, is like, working in music or whatever. So I made the decision to take that job. And I remember the boyfriend had given me a candle and he was like this whole note and it was like, oh, light this candle and, like sort of meditate on it and then blow out the candle and sort of like your decision will be there. And yeah, I did that. And I sobbed and packed up my stuff and I went to New York. And I thought, my dad kind of said to me, oh, well, if you don't like the music industry, if you don't like the job, you can always leave it and go back to acting. And I was like, huh, okay. But somehow in my heart of hearts, I knew I wasn't going to go back. Like I was making a decision. Yeah. And crazy that the day after I had packed up all my stuff and flown back to New York, the next morning, 9/11, 2001.
Oh my God.
Yep.
Oh my God, I have chills.
So
wow.
I woke up that morning to planes had flown into the World Trade Center, and I was just like, what? Like, how could the airport have screwed up so bad? Like, it never even entered my mind that it could have been what it was. I thought maybe traffic control messed up. Yeah. And I stood on a fire escape in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and watched the towers fall. Oh
my God, what a first day in New York.
Yeah. I had been there for the summer, but
right.
I literally just I accepted the job at Universal, and that was really devastating too. So there was kind of like a mixture of, just morning leaving, deciding not to do that, but then also all of that had happened. That was just, that whole sort of month was a blur. I don't really remember a lot of it.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I've seen a lot of stories of, New Yorkers or even American people talking about it, and they all have the same thing. They all say that it was such a traumatizing event, and I must imagine for you, being in that state in your life as well, it's already a big change to turn that chapter for you for acting and moving into a new city and starting a new life, and then that happens.
It's crazy that was 22 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's only just recently that I'm able to talk about it without crying.
Really?
You carry that for so long, seeing something like that happen right in front of your eyes. And I think also because I was 25 at the time. So something like that happens at that age, it kind of impacts you because you're still kind of a kid, really. So... And you're out on your own, and it was just sort of I just want to be, I just want to give my parents a hug, I just want to know that everything's okay. And you're like, I know that it probably isn't, and it may never be again. So, crazy stuff.
Yeah, crazy. Wow.
So, and when things like that happen, too, you just kind of realize as well, and then you think about the pandemic. It's when these kinds of events happen, it's kind of like an opportunity for us to reset ourselves and to say, you know what? Life's too short.
Yeah.
A lot of crazy shit can happen. So
just try it and start something new, and
exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Make change.
Yeah, make change happen. Yeah, I feel that's exactly the topic of the conversation, and also what I'm trying to bring to the table is that we need to be more innovative. We need to bring light on those people like you who are kind of trying to challenge the status quo and change stuff and push the boundaries a little bit, and especially in the fashion industry where, I feel has a lot to give and is an amazing industry, right? But there's also a lot of things that needs changing.
A lot of things need changing.
Yeah.
It's such with every industry that I go into, there's this, you think like from the top part, it looks all shiny and amazing. And then there's this really, like just dark, nasty underbelly to it. I mean, even the music industry as well, like this stuff that the labels would put the artists through. It's just like, can I do anything that's not like
that doesn't get me into that. I can relate to that from what I've seen and heard, and like all the stories I've heard as well from people. We'll talk about the fashion industry in a bit. Just going back into like your experience. So fast forward to when you're starting your entrepreneurial journey, right? And being a founder and like building your own business with your co-founder. Something that is I feel a bit taboo in the world of entrepreneurship and like startups and stuff is that there's always something about co-founders. Like there's always something about the relationship. Like if you're by yourself, obviously you're by yourself, but like if you have a co-founder or 2 or 3 co-founders, then it's really important to be able to manage those relationship well, because it's very tricky and specific. How did you manage the relationship, and what did you learn from working with someone else? Because you said that it deteriorated a bit at the end.
It's interesting because there are 2 or 3 sides to this, because now being on the academic side and knowing the things that we work on in the course, it's really difficult to do anything by yourself. I mean, it really takes a team of people to really, if you want to get something done and do it well, it's really difficult to do it all on your own. So I did need her. I just didn't know how to balance that relationship. I think also we stupidly didn't put in place a partnership agreement from the very beginning to really delineate what was my responsibility, what was her responsibility, what were our expectations of each other, what was the day-to-day going to look like. Yeah, we'd never really sat down and put those things in writing, and I think that's extremely important. Even if you think your best friend, because she and we were actually really good friends. I miss her because we enjoyed each other's company. And that's what made it so difficult when I get so angry with her about stuff, because it's like, I didn't want to be angry with her because she was a friend. But, when I felt like things just weren't either happening as quickly as they needed to happen, or things got a little sloppy, or managing each other's expectations, knowing a lot about the other person. And I don't mean from a friendship perspective, I mean from like a team or leadership perspective. So all of those Myers-Briggs tests and all of, but to really look at them and say, okay, what does this mean? If you're a completer finisher, or you're a plant, or, whatever, all of the terminology, what does that actually mean? What do you bring to the table, and what can I bring to the table to kind of even out? And we were yin and yang. Like, she's very analytical. So the way that she kind of processed things was a skill set that I just did not have. Right. I'm more gut. We both were very passionate. She's from Brazil, so she, I think, just by nature was very passionate, but something would set me off and I would just like, rah! So she was good for me in a lot of ways, but because we never really decided in advance what those
relationship would be, because obviously it's different from your friendship, right?
Yes. Yeah. So no matter how well you think you know someone, or how well you think it's all going to go, you should really sit down. It doesn't take that much money to start a lot of businesses. I mean, you can really test an idea using, what's called like a prototype, and then make samples of things. And there's so many opportunities now to pre-sale, or, to like Kickstarter, get crowdfunding, things like that. You don't need a whole, but spend the money to get a partnership agreement. And that goes for like one person or 5 people or whatever. I have heard from others that when there are more co-founders, sometimes it's better because there's like a third or fourth person to kind of weigh in when there's a disagreement or a stalemate or a deadlock. But I'm sure they have their own unique problems as well. So yeah, I think if I'd had some coaching skills, if I'd had some proper sort of like if I had read some books on leadership or, kind of taken some stock in it, I think things might have been different.
So the advice you would give is like manage expectations, get that partnership agreement, even if it's a bit painful because you're friends and you don't want that, get that written down because, managing expectations and managing each other's, I guess, personalities as well. And
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of free personality tests and I would do the ones that are geared towards like teamwork and leadership, not the what does Vogue or Cosmopolitan say about me?
Are you more a Vogue person or
are you a Carrie or a Miranda? I mean, definitely they can be very useful, but you can't just like read the report and be like, okay, like you need to actually delve into it and talk about what the report means. Like, what do these things mean? And, what skills, what knowledge, skills, and abilities do you feel like you bring to the table? And where are the gaps in both parties? So you might actually find out that as co-founders, you're still missing like a big piece of the puzzle or pie. And then you're like, okay, well, we need to make sure that we've, got that covered so that when the time comes and the shit hits the fan, and it always does, you can manage through it or limp through it, and you can help each other as opposed to wanting to blow each other up. So it's like, like a good military unit or something like that, where they all, as a team, they all know what their strengths and each of them has like a task, and they know what their jobs are, and there's no question about who's doing what at what time. Like we didn't have that, and I felt like I worked 24/7. And when I would talk to her, she'd be like, oh, I was just, like playing a game on my phone or something. Like I said, what she did was really important. Maybe I wasn't being a good leader because I could have said, well, can you do this, this, or that? But I also was a control freak, and I didn't want to give up control over certain things. So, I think it's important to look at yourself as well and do a lot of self-reflection if you're going into business and want to work with other people. You've got to get that peer assessment and then do a self-reflection.
I think that's so important, what you just said, because I mean, being very early in my entrepreneurship journey as well and building my own business, well, obviously I'm by myself for now, so it's a bit different, but I feel that piece around being very self-aware is so important because I mean, you think you know yourself, but wait until you have to like build a business and like face your own kind of insecurities or fears or whatever you have, and kind of realize that actually you need to be super aware of yourself and know when you need to stop, when you need to start, all the things that you like, that you don't like. And I think that's a good segue actually to one of the questions I wanted to ask you, the London College of Fashion and what you're doing there. I'm very passionate about leadership and corporate culture. I've been very lucky to be able to do huge culture transformation projects for fashion houses, and it was amazing to do that. But obviously, it's not the case for every fashion companies or fashion houses to really care about culture and employee engagement and diversity and inclusion and so on. And I think the fact that the fashion industry is still seen as such a privileged industry makes it a bit toxic in a way. And I think that change definitely needs to happen, at least at the start from the top. But places at the leadership now in the fashion industry are very locked and stuff. So I'm wondering, because you are working with students, right? And you are seeing like all the great projects that they're working on and the person that they're becoming. What kind of leaders do you see emerging from your students, and like what are the traits that you think are going to, I don't know, be important as, leaders of fashion in the future?
The way that we teach, and I'm going to put air quotes around teach because we really kind of say that we coach the team entrepreneurs or students through developing their brands and businesses. So we use what's called Team Academy. So in Finland in the 90s, one of the big universities, it's free to go to university there, by the way. So all of these students were going through university. Apparently there was a recession going on and they couldn't find jobs when they got out. So a group of professors got together and said, well, what if we developed kind of like an entrepreneurship or enterprise program that prepared the students for industry by basically like getting them to develop their own business. And then then they'll have a job when they finish because they'll have their own business. So basically they can spend the 3 years in university, building a business together with a team of other students. Mm-hmm. So they developed this concept and they basically borrowed and kind of, I don't know if steal is really the right word because it's not like the concepts and the frameworks and stuff. I mean, they're out there. They're used by lots of really big companies or big former companies. For example, Motorola used this sort of like pre and post project analysis that again became sort of this Team Academy-ism. That they call it a pre and post Motorola because Motorola was like the company that used it, where it's kind of looking at before you start a project, what do you need, what tools, who do you need to talk, et cetera, and then post is like what worked, what didn't work, what did we learn from it, and what are we going to do moving forward, so like what's our action plan. So they used all of these kinds of tools and kind of threw it in there and they said, okay, it's going to be learning by doing, no lectures, no tests. You're just going to develop a business on the course and you'll be graded on whether or not you make money. Can you launch it? Is it a successful business? And we're, the coaches were there to kind of like support them through the process. Mm-hmm. So this pedagogy, or that's actually called a hutagogy, because it's self-determined learning. It's self-directed learning. So the student or the learner is responsible for learning whatever it is that they want to learn. And the coach is just there to ask really powerful questions in order to kind of like get them to the next step. So in using that, leadership and team are like two of the pillars that go with that. You have to be a leader within a team, and you have to understand what it means to be a team member within that team. So kind of what I see happening and the way that we've kind of positioned the course, and I think generally this is the way leadership is working, maybe not in the fashion industry, but definitely in other industries, is, well, Team Academy calls it friendship leadership. Like that's how it translates in Finnish. But it is leading from within the team. So we actually, again, I'm going to put air quotes around teach, but the coaching techniques. So how to team coach, how to peer coach, but also how to team coach, because really being a leader isn't about a top-down sort of, I'm going to tell you what to do and now you're going to go do it. It's about empowering the people around you by asking them powerful questions so that they feel part of the movement. They feel part of fixing the problem or part of developing the next thing, whether it's a new product or a new silhouette or a new garment or whatever, whatever it is. They are part of that because they've been empowered by their leader to do so, rather than saying, okay, yep, here's this, now you go and do this. It's about, well, what would you do? How would you go about this? Those kinds of questions. So it's more of a collaborative process. Again, the hope is that these team entrepreneurs or students will go off and become the next leaders. But in all honesty, if they leave the fashion industry entirely and go do something else.
Yeah, that's great as well.
Yeah. I mean, I see this course being a vehicle for social purpose. So I'm not that interested in whether or not, I'd be thrilled for my students if they become hugely successful, but I'm more interested in who they are as human beings. Like, are they going out there to be a better human being and caring about people, planet, process, and being part of the solution and not part of the problem. And again, it goes back to that leadership. How do they tackle a problem? It takes reflection. It takes having a team of people. It takes having a really strong vision, knowing what you want, and not stopping at failure. Like, so if it doesn't work out the first time around, that's all right. How can we iterate and try this again?
Yeah.
And so it's resilience, it's agility, and just realizing that the world is never going to be a perfect place. Volatile, uncertain. Well, there's an acronym called VUCA.
VUCA, yeah. Volatile, uncertain, I forgot the C, ambiguous.
Yes. Yeah. So, yeah, how do you, as a leader or as a how do you face the world when there's always going to be, I mean, VUCA was around, I mean, it's been around since like the 70s. It was like the Vietnam War is, kind of where it came from. So there's always these huge life events that are going to happen that are going to cause all kinds of waves of
changes.
Yeah. They're only going to get more frequent unless we start making change.
Yeah.
And it's in that discomfort of uncertainty and volatility and ambiguity that innovation happens. So we mimic that on the course in a way. We don't give a lot of direction. I mean, they basically all have to unlearn what they know about traditional education because they're used to somebody standing in front of them, holding all the knowledge and lecturing to them and giving them PowerPoints and saying, this is what you should learn. This is how you should learn it, and it's from my perspective, and there is no other way but this way. And we don't do that. We sit in a circle. We don't even allow tech in the classroom, so no laptops, no phones, because it's a distraction.
Yeah.
And we want everybody to be present and contributing because, again, as a team, if we're all sharing our knowledge, skills, and abilities with each other, we can get so much more accomplished.
Yeah.
So if we're distracted by TikTok and buying an outfit on Farfetch or shopping for shoes or whatever it is, or texting with our friends or roommates, or then we're not fully present. And the team can actually feel that. Like you can feel it when somebody's like not in the room anymore.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's how we see the leadership happening. It's like you've got to kind of take it all in, get really uncomfortable with it, talk about it, reflect on it, and then in the end, you become a stronger, more confident person who isn't afraid that your ego is not going to shatter if your idea doesn't get used, or if people don't do everything in exactly the way that you want them to. It's like, that's not how life works. So it's better to work together, be collaborative, and empower each other than try and squash everybody down and just
of course.
to climb higher. Like the world doesn't need another Jeff Bezos.
I'm definitely in that mindset as well, and that's exactly what I want to also tell employees and leaders in organizations. And I feel like the fact that, we are being innovative and that you are in like the education, it's also like very innovative way of thinking. And I thought that actually I wasn't that innovative. I mean, I was like, that's kind of obvious after everything that happens with COVID, like everyone must be thinking the same now. We need to change and we need to... But then actually some people were like, well, that's still quite a new way of thinking. Like people are still not quite ready for that change, or they don't want to see it, or or whatever. So I think it's super powerful that you are kind of teaching with quotes with your students, because that's exactly the type of people and leader that we need in the future. And I think you said also something really interesting about helping them build businesses that are more purposeful for people and planet and the environment and everything. And I find that fashion, and I mean a lot of other industries, but because we talk about fashion, has always been about profit and consumerism. That's the essence of fashion, right? So how do we move that mindset in this industry from profit to purpose? And how do you teach that as well to your students? Because obviously we can't forget the profit part, right? We need to make money. That's, fashion that's an industry where that's how it works. But then how do you make some compromise as well and leave some space for that purpose piece, right? Because
I mean, honestly, we'd need so much more time with them. So it's just about planting seeds, really. I was really naive when I first started doing this, thinking that oh, we're going to make all this change, It's like, it doesn't really work that way. 5 years on, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm just happy that I've planted some seeds. And we changed some learning outcomes and course aims. So my predecessor retired, and I always joke that she was the Willy Wonka, and I was just like the Charlie Bucket who got the golden tickets. She'd reapproved the course to kind of be the coaching, which was her choice, but oddly enough, she often struggled with switching out of lecture mode into, so she had to do a lot of unlearning herself. Like, she knew this was the way forward, but it's hard to undo what you've always done. And I think the biggest thing, again, was fear, like, oh, but the students are expecting us to lecture to them. So if we don't do that, they're going to be angry and they're going to want their money back and they're not going to understand. So it took a minute. Well, the first cohort really hated us. There were like 18 of them, and they were like, what is this? Like, I don't get it. And because we were
That's not what I applied for.
Yeah. And because we were kind of stumbling along with it, like, I felt bad. They were kind of guinea pigs. But I mean, we still, it's interesting because I still keep in touch with quite a few of them. And the ones who keep in touch with me were like, no, I get it. Like, I actually got a lot out of it. I know that you guys didn't really know what you were doing, but that was okay. And at the end of the day, we are all just learning together. I mean, I every year learn more from my team entrepreneurs probably than they learn from me. It's very fascinating. And they've got all these amazing ideas. But yeah, my predecessor retired and kind of, left me the chocolate factory. And I recently got the opportunity to make some changes. So brought on to my team a gal named Sabina Rakimova. She's got a sustainable and ethical women's wear brand called Sabina Studios. And it was her really who, sustainability and ethical consumption, all of that stuff has always been something that I've been passionate about, but she's actually studied it. So for her, it's like, no, we need to embed this. And the university wanted to embed it in the curriculum anyway, but it was sort of like, okay, how do we do this though? Because also keeping in mind, we're going to have students from all over the world, right? And from places where sustainability just doesn't, it's just a word that kind of floats around in the air and nobody actually knows what it means or knows how to practice it. So can we really expect a student who's coming here after, 20-something years of not knowing what that is, and in 15 weeks, like, knowing how to build a sustainable business? Yeah. We need to be gentle. It's slow, as the Italians say, piano, piano. It's like slowly, right? So we're able to embed some things to say, okay, you need to consider this. Like, how is your concept future-proofed? Because you're thinking about regenerative, circular. I mean, look at the trends that are out there. Like, they've come to London College of Fashion to be open to, the trends and what's happening. So, they've now got all of this access to business of fashion and all of these incredible resources that are telling them sustainability is the way to go. And it's not what you think. I mean, most of them in the first couple of weeks or even in interviews, when they are telling me what sustainability is, I'm like, oh man, this is so, you're so greenwashed. So yeah, it's a really tough one. But I will say this. I went to an enterprise conference last summer, and there was a guy from Stanford who did a keynote speech, and he was really, really, it was great. It was like a TED Talk, Right. And he was talking about his enterprise program and how the student of his came to and said, I'm gluten intolerant, and there aren't any places around that I can go to get gluten-free baked goods. Like, there are no cafes. So I want to open up a bakery for, gluten-free baked goods. And he was like, okay, that's a good start. That's a good aim. And she's like, what do you mean that's a good start? Like that. And he was like, well, how can we make this bigger? Like, what is your true aim here? Yeah. And when you got down to the bottom of it, really what she wanted to do was to help anyone who has a gluten intolerance feel safe when they go to a restaurant or a bakery or whatever, that the food that they're eating it doesn't have gluten in it. Yeah. So long story short, by the end of this program, she'd actually developed a device So she went from wanting to just do a gluten-free bakery to developing a device that you could use to test your food with to see how much gluten was in it.
Wow.
And a community that to share, so you're sharing that information with everyone, restaurant, bakery, whatever, and also talking about your experience. That's the kind of thing that needs to happen. We need to go away from the students who come onto the course thinking, I want to start a sustainable fashion brand. It's like, yeah, but if everybody says, I want to start a sustainable fashion brand, it's not sustainable because sustainability means not making more.
Yeah.
So the innovation part of it has to be, okay, in the same way that you have to unlearn what you know about education, you need to unlearn what you know or think you know about sustainability and unlearn what your whole life has told you about consumption of fashion goods. And it's difficult because we live in a world where we're constantly bombarded with
like information about what sustainability is or is not, and
but not even that, but just what's new and what's next and what's cool and what's going to make you look good and what's going to make you feel good, and Instagram and TikTok, images everywhere constantly. We can't get away from it. And then you're walking past shops of beautiful clothes and you're like, oh, it's really difficult.
It's difficult,
and tempting. I imagine it's like being gluten intolerant and walking through, a city full of bakeries and being like, oh, I can't have any of it.
Yeah.
So it's
but I feel like the point here, and you touched on that very well, is like it's not about building another business. It's about why you do it, because like the story of like this girl who wanted to build a gluten-free bakery. At the end of the day, what she wanted to do was to help other people who are like gluten intolerant, right? And that's how change happens, right? It's not just because I want to do this new business. It's about what change do you want to see happening and why do you want to do it, right?
Yeah. It's solving a customer problem. It's design thinking, really. So I always, a red flag goes up when when I say, okay, well, who's your customer base? And they're like, oh, well, they're like me. They're this, and it's like, okay, so are you the only customer? Because you can't just build a business for yourself. I mean, you need to be solving a bigger problem. And if you're not, then you need to ask yourself what the point is, because it's, the world does not need another fashion brand. It just doesn't.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, I mean, we've talked about so much interesting stuff. I guess, something that would be probably really valuable for listeners if they are, other, I don't know, maybe aspiring fashion leaders who want to build at least purposeful business, if not sustainable.
I'm like bashing.
No, but like something, if they want to build a business, a fashion business, or they want to be entrepreneurs, what advice would you give them? Like, what would be the first most important advice that you would give them?
Two things, because it's impact. It's what is the impact you're making, which does go to the problem solving thing. Like what, so Simon Sinek is a great,
you know
about Simon Sinek, and we talk about Sinek a lot on the course. So finding your why, and I think I've found asking why questions can feel very daunting because they seem a lot bigger than if you ask what questions. What questions tends to break things down into more digestible bits. So if asking yourself what is my why is too big, that's okay. Just start with what. What do I want to do really? What is it that I'm, what's my purpose with this brand? What change do I want to make? What problems do I want to solve? And eventually you'll get to that sort of bigger why. But human-centered design, customer first, and being empathetic with customer. I think, we talk about inclusive fashion from, a perspective of size, but there's so much more to inclusive fashion than just size.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So if we're going to make clothing, let's make it count. Like let's make it do more than just cover our bodies and look good. Like so many people are suffering with mental anxiety, especially after the pandemic, right? I mean, anxiety is such a huge issue now. What if what you wore could make you feel better? Like, because I don't know, the way, it's going to sound really horrible to compare it to dogs, but there are these things called thunder shirts for dogs that are supposed to make them feel more comfortable during thunderstorms and stuff like that. Like it like gives them almost like a hug. So what if there was clothing, you know what I'm saying? So it's like,
that make you feel this way.
Yeah. So if we're going to make more clothes, then let's make them for a bigger purpose than just, to adorn ourselves with something different. Or, I mean, we all forget about Tom's, but actually Tom's was a great business model. Buy one, give a pair to someone in need, So, again, bringing it back to that social purpose. Or for a while there was a tension focused on cultural misappropriation and all of us kind of realized, oh my gosh, there's all these artisans in these places who their ideas are getting stolen and big fashion brands like Zara and Primark and all the rest of it, H&M are stealing, and they're putting it all over their dresses and stuff, and that poor artisan doesn't even know it exists because they're not on the internet or whatever. So again, things like that, and I shouldn't say, it's not even just artisans from small villages. I mean, regular artists who also getting ripped off. So I don't know. I mean, if there's just like ways that we can make a difference, is I think asking the question, is this going to make a difference, and what impact will it make?
Is a good start.
Yeah, it's a good start.
Amazing. Well, I guess we're getting to the end of the podcast, unfortunately. After all the things that we talked about today, and knowing that the title of the podcast is WonderWorkers, what would you say is your superpower?
That's a good one. We actually ask our team entrepreneurs that every year. Like, it's one of the first sort of like icebreakers. I would say, a phoenix rising from the ashes. So I think my superpower is being able to sort of rise from the ashes. Yeah.
Amazing. Love that. And last question, who would you like to hear from next in this podcast in terms of change makers? Doesn't have to be fashion.
I would love to hear, I mean, I'm a big fan of leadership as well. So kind of more on like female leadership and, changes from the top, kind of thinking through. You kind of touched on it for a second too. It's the imposter syndrome. So when you look around the room and it's like, in essence, you're kind of lucky to be sitting at the table, but that just like shouldn't be that way. So something around that I think would be really interesting.
Interesting. I love that. Yeah, I'll think about it. Make some research. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Stacia. I mean, it was great. It went so fast, and I love that because that means it was a great conversation. So thank you so much for sharing, your journey, your experience, and all your advice as well. It was really interesting. So
thanks for having me. Yeah, it was really fun.
Thank you. Follow the WonderWorkers podcast so that every 2 weeks you can get notified when a new episode is out. And I must say, if you don't, that's okay. But that would be a big miss because we have more inspiring and powerful guests to come. So let's meet up in 2 weeks for a new episode of WonderWorkers, a podcast that transports you into the world of our modern change catalysts and empowers you too to change the world. This podcast is created and hosted by me, Laura Warnod, founder of The Culture Cabinet. Thank you to Content is Queen for producing the podcast. But above all, thank you for listening. See you soon!